The sun hung low over the quiet town of San Miguel, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow, where the scent of fresh tortillas mixed with the dust of the road, and where everyone knew everyone until the cartel moved in. Sofia Morales wiped her hands on her apron and stepped back, admiring the little farm stand she and her daughter had built. Fresh tomatoes gleamed under the sunlight, nestled beside plump avocados and bundles of cilantro tied with twine. A wooden sign, hand-painted in bright colors, read, "Luna's Fresh Produce," named after her 7-year-old daughter, Luna. Luna stood behind the stand, her dark curls bouncing as she greeted an elderly woman with a bright, dimpled smile. "Buenos dias, Señora Garcia. Do you want the sweetest mangoes today?" Her voice was full of life, untouched by the shadows creeping into their town. Sofia watched, arms crossed, a small smile tugging at her lips. This was their little world. Simple, safe, or at least it had been. Lately, she had noticed changes. Small. At first, strange cars idling near the plaza, unfamiliar men with sharp eyes and sharper words, whispers of businesses closing overnight, of neighbors disappearing without a word. A silent war was creeping through San Miguel, and now it had reached her doorstep. She noticed them before they spoke. 3 men, clad in dark clothes, walking toward the stand with slow, deliberate steps. Their presence was wrong, like oil staining clear water. The leader, a tall man with a thick beard, smirked as he plucked an apple from the stand and bit into it without asking. Luna's smile faltered. "Sir, you have to pay for that." The man laughed, glancing at his companions. "You hear that? Chicos, the little girl thinks we have to pay." Sofia stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Luna's shoulder. "You've had your fun. Move along." Her voice was even, controlled. The bearded man cocked his head, chewing slowly. "You must be new here, Senora. See, this town, it belongs to us now, and if you want to sell, you pay." Sofia's fingers tightened around the edge of the stand. "This is my land, my food. I don't pay anyone to sell what's mine." A slow, dangerous silence stretched between them. Then, without warning, the man's hand shot out, knocking over a basket of tomatoes. Red splattered against the ground like drops of blood. Another man grabbed a crate of oranges and flung it aside. The wooden stand wobbled as a boot kicked against it, sending fruits rolling into the dirt. Luna gasped, stepping back, her small hands trembling. Sofia inhaled slowly, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from restraint. They had no idea who she was. They saw only a helpless woman with a child. They didn't know she had spent years as a Marine sniper. They didn't know the hands that once cradled fruit had also pulled a trigger from over a mile away. The bearded man leaned in close, his breath reeking of smoke. "This is your first warning, Senora. Next time we take more than just your fruit." He turned, whistling for his men to follow. They laughed as they walked away, leaving destruction in their wake. Sofia didn't move, didn't breathe, but something inside her had already shifted. She looked down at Luna, who was clutching the hem of her apron, eyes wide and brimming with unspoken questions. Sofia knelt, brushing dirt from Luna's cheek. "Go inside, Mija. I need to take care of something." She stood, her gaze locked onto the retreating men. They thought they owned this town. They thought they could take whatever they wanted, but they had just made a grave mistake. They had messed with the wrong mother. Sky had barely begun to lighten when Sofia heard the distant rumble of an engine. It was low, steady, almost unremarkable, except for the way it crawled through the quiet streets like a predator hunting in the dark. She stiffened, her fingers tightening around the ceramic mug in her hands as she stood by the window, watching. Luna was still asleep, curled up beneath a thin woven blanket, her small body rising and falling with each peaceful breath. Sofia had barely slept. She had spent most of the night sitting at the worn kitchen table, staring at the disassembled pieces of her old rifle, the one she had sworn she would never touch again. The SUV rolled to a stop just beyond their front gate, its black paint gleaming under the soft glow of the street lamp. It sat there for a moment, idling. Then the back door opened. A man stepped out, adjusting the cuffs of his pristine white shirt. He was tall and lean, his sharp features marked by an expression of quiet amusement. This was not the same brute from yesterday. This man carried himself differently, like someone who didn't need to raise his voice to command power. His gaze swept over the house, the farm stand that now lay in disarray, before settling on Sophia. She did not flinch, did not look away. For a long moment neither of them moved. Then he tilted his head slightly, the ghost of a smile on his lips. A silent message. Sophia remained still, her heart steady, her expression unreadable. Satisfied, the man stepped back into the SUV. The door shut with a muted thud, and the vehicle pulled away, disappearing down the road in a cloud of dust. Sophia exhaled slowly. They were watching. They weren't finished, and they were waiting for something. Her grip on the mug tightened until she forced herself to set it down. She walked back to the table where her rifle lay in pieces. Her hands hovered over it for a moment before she picked up the barrel, running her fingers along the cold metal. 12 years had passed since she had last held a weapon in combat. 12 years since she had left behind the precision, the discipline, the kill-or-be-killed instinct that had once defined her. She had promised herself that life was over, but the past had a way of creeping back. She sat down, rolling her shoulders, inhaling deeply. Then, without hesitation, she began to reassemble the rifle. Her hands moved with the same practiced ease they always had, the movements buried deep in her muscle memory. Click, snap, slide. It felt both foreign and familiar, like stepping into old boots after years of walking barefoot. She didn't want this, but the cartel had made their move, and now she would make hers. By midday, whispers had already begun to spread through San Miguel. The men from El Lobos were seen at the cantina, laughing, drinking. No one spoke out loud, but everyone knew what had happened at Luna's farm stand. They knew what it meant. Sophia walked through the market, her presence drawing a few cautious glances. Some averted their eyes, pretending not to see her. Others gave her fleeting looks of sympathy. The fear in the air was palpable. She stopped at Don Emiliano's store again, stepping inside just as the bell above the door chimed softly. The old man sighed as he saw her. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" Sophia leaned against the counter. "Tell me everything." Emiliano hesitated, rubbing his hands together. "The man from this morning," he said quietly. "He's not just some enforcer. They call him El Fantasma." She frowned. "The ghost?" "A nickname," Emiliano said. "No one knows his real name, but he's dangerous, Sophia. He doesn't just take money, he takes people." Sophia inhaled sharply, her stomach twisting. "He's been moving through smaller towns," Emiliano continued. "First he demands payment. Then, when people can't pay, they start disappearing. Women, children." He lowered his voice. "Luna isn't safe." Sophia's blood turned to ice. She had spent years protecting her daughter from the darkness of her past, but it had found them anyway. She turned to leave, but Emiliano grabbed her wrist. "There's something else," he whispered. "People say he used to be military, like you." Sophia froze. The world seemed to tilt for a moment, as if the ground beneath her was shifting. A man with training. A man who knew how to move, how to hunt, how to kill. She stepped out of the store, her pulse thrumming in her ears. The cartel hadn't just sent some thug to intimidate her, they had sent a predator, and predators only stopped when they were put down. The air in San Miguel had changed. It was heavier now, thick with something unspoken but deeply felt. Fear. Sophia had seen fear before, on battlefields, in the eyes of men who knew they were already dead but hadn't fallen yet. But this was different. This wasn't the fear of war. It was the fear of something worse, the kind of suffocating control that crept into people's lives and made them believe they had no choice but to obey. And that control had a name. Phantasma. She had spent the morning rebuilding Luna's farm stand, putting each piece back in place, as if restoring it would somehow restore the sense of security they had lost. But she knew better. The farm stand was just a symbol, a challenge. The real battle was still ahead. She stepped inside their small home, the worn wooden floor creaking beneath her feet. Luna sat at the kitchen table, her knees pulled up to her chest as she watched her mother with careful eyes. "They're not going to stop, are they?" she asked. Sophia set down a basket of fresh produce, sighing. "No, Mija, they won't." Luna hesitated, then looked down. "Are you going to stop them?" Sophia's heart clenched. Her daughter was too young to understand the weight of the question. Too young to know what it meant when a woman like her, who had spent years hunting men across foreign deserts, was forced back into a world she had tried to leave behind. But Luna had never seen that version of her mother. She didn't know. The things Sophia had done. Sophia sat down beside her, brushing a curl from her face. "I will keep you safe," she promised. Luna searched her mother's face for a long moment, then simply nodded. She trusted her, and that was all Sophia needed. The market was quieter than usual. Vendors kept their voices low. Conversations were cut short when certain figures passed by. The fear was growing. Sophia walked with steady purpose, scanning every shadow, every movement. She had spent the last decade suppressing this part of herself, the predator, the soldier. But now it was waking up, stretching inside her like a beast that had slept too long. She had one good goal: find El Fantasma before he found her again. She stopped in front of La Cantina Roja, the only bar in town where the cartel conducted business in plain sight. The red neon light flickered, casting a bloody glow onto the cracked pavement. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of cheap liquor and sweat. Men sat hunched over tables, talking in low voices, their laughter sharp and edged with cruelty. She didn't need to ask where he was. She felt him before she saw him. At the back of the room, seated in a leather booth. He watched her. El Fantasma. He didn't move, didn't react, just tilted his head slightly, as if amused by her presence. Sophia squared her shoulders and walked toward him. When she stopped at the edge of his table, his lips curled into that same deliberate smile from earlier. "Senora Morales," he said smoothly. "I was hoping we'd meet again." She didn't sit, didn't look away. "You made a mistake." His dark eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Oh?" Sophia leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "You should have finished what you started." There was a pause. A long, drawn-out beat where the room seemed to shrink around them. Then he laughed. It was soft at first, then deeper, richer, like he was truly entertained. "You are," he said, leaning forward, his elbows resting on the table. "Not like the others." She didn't answer. He studied her, his gaze flicking over her as if peeling back layers. "I did some research on you," he murmured. "Quite a history. Marine." Her fingers twitched. "Sniper, wasn't it?" He continued watching. For a reaction. "Very impressive. And then you just disappeared." He leaned back. "Until now." She forced herself to remain still. He wanted a reaction. He wanted control. She wouldn't give him either. "I'm not your enemy," he said after a moment, his voice soft, persuasive. "But I could be your worst nightmare if you force my hand." Sophia exhaled slowly, carefully. "You think I'm afraid of you?" El Fantasma smiled again. "I think you have something to lose." Her pulse steadied. She had heard these kinds of threats before. But the problem with men like him was that they always underestimated women like her. She took a step closer, placing both hands on the table. "If you so much as look at my daughter again," she whispered, "I will remind you why ghosts should fear the living." His smile didn't falter, but his fingers twitched slightly against the table. A subtle, almost imperceptible movement. She had hit a nerve. Sophia turned and walked away without another word. As she stepped out into the cool night air, she knew. She had just declared war. The attack came 2 nights later. It was quiet, too quiet, when Sophia woke with a start. Her instincts screamed, "Danger!" before her mind had even caught up. Then she heard it, the soft click of a gate being unlatched. She was out of bed in an instant, moving without sound, as she grabbed the rifle she had hidden beneath the floorboards. She glanced at Luna, still asleep, and whispered, "Stay." Sophia moved through the darkness like a shadow. Years of training guided her every step. She pressed herself against the wall near the window, waiting. Then a figure stepped onto the porch. She barely caught the glint of metal before she moved. A single, precise shot shattered the night. The man crumpled. Another figure rushed forward. She fired again. More footsteps, more shadows moving. They had sent for 4 men. They hadn't expected her to be ready. The third man fired wildly, bullets slamming into the wooden walls of her home. Sophia crouched low, exhaling slowly. 1 breath, 1 shot. Down. The 4th man hesitated, realizing he was alone now. She could almost smell his fear. He turned to run. Sophia let him. She wanted him to tell El Fantasma what had happened here. She wanted him to tell everyone. The house was silent again. Only the scent of gunpowder lingered. She lowered the rifle, breathing hard. Behind her, a soft voice broke the silence. "Mama?" Sophia turned, finding Luna standing in the doorway. She had seen everything. Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat and walked over, kneeling before her daughter. Luna didn't look afraid. She looked curious. Her small fingers reached out, brushing against her mother's calloused hands. "You knew they were coming." Sophia nodded. "Yes." Luna was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, "Are more coming?" Sophia exhaled. "Yes." Luna hesitated, then took her mother's hand and held it tightly. "Then we get ready." Sophia's breath caught. Her daughter's eyes, so much like her own, were steady. There was no fear in them, only understanding, only resolve. Sophia pulled Luna into her arms, holding her close. No one was going to take her daughter. No one was going to win Suzanne this fight, because Sophia Morales was no longer just a mother. She was a soldier again, and war was coming. The desert air was thick with heat, pressing against Sophia's skin like an unspoken warning. The bodies of the men she had taken down 2 nights ago had been removed before sunrise, whether by the cartel or the authorities she didn't know. But it didn't matter. El Fantasma hadn't sent them to kill her. He had sent them to test her, and now he knew exactly what she was capable of. Sophia could feel it coming, like the tremor in the earth before an earthquake. He was going to make his move. She spent the morning reinforcing the house, securing the windows, setting up traps along the property. Her hands worked with the same mechanical precision she had honed in war. Luna sat on the porch, watching her mother with quiet focus. Finally she spoke. "Mama, what if we leave?" Sophia paused, exhaling slowly. She had thought about it, about packing up and disappearing into the night. It wouldn't be hard. She had done it before, but this wasn't just about running anymore. "If we leave," she said, turning to face her daughter, "he'll still come after us. He'll come after someone else." Luna's small hands clenched into fists. "We end this here," Sophia said. Luna nodded, her face set in quiet determination. A part of Sophia ached at how quickly her daughter was learning what it meant to stand and fight, but she had no choice. The sun had barely begun to set when the first sign of trouble arrived. A pickup truck, shiny, black, with tinted windows, rolled to a slow stop in front of their gate. Sophia watched from the kitchen window, her rifle already in her hands. Two men stepped out. They weren't the usual enforcers. They were dressed too clean, too professional. They weren't here to rough her up. They were here to deliver a message. She stepped onto the porch, keeping the rifle at her side, but not hidden. The taller of the two men smiled. "Senora Morales," he greeted. His voice was smooth, calculated. "El Fantasma would like a word." Sophia didn't flinch. Then he should have come himself. The man's smile didn't waver, but his fingers twitched slightly at his side. "He respects you. That's why he's offering you a chance." Sophia arched a brow. "A chance for what?" To walk away, she let out a sharp laugh. "You don't send men to kill someone and then offer them a way out." The second man, shorter but stockier, stepped forward. "We both know you're not a simple farmer," he said. "You were trained. You've killed before." Sophia's grip on the rifle remained steady. "The only reason you're still breathing," the first man continued, "is because he finds you interesting." That made her stomach twist. Interesting. Like she was some puzzle to be solved, some challenge to be overcome. "You think this is a game?" she asked. The taller man's smile widened. "Everything is a game." Sophia stared at him for a long moment. Then she took a single step forward, lowering her voice. "Tell your boss that I don't play games." The man's smile faltered for the briefest second. Then, without another word, he turned and got back into the truck. The engine roared to life, and they drove off, kicking up a cloud of dust in their wake. Sophia watched them disappear down the road, her stomach churning. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. That night, Luna fell asleep quickly, exhaustion finally winning over. Sophia, however, sat in the dark, her rifle across her lap, listening to the sounds of the night. Then she heard it. A soft rustling. Too controlled to be the wind, someone was near. She moved soundlessly, stepping toward the back door, her pulse steady. Through the darkness, as shadows moved near the fence. Not one. Two. She exhaled slowly, raising the rifle. One shot. One kill. But something stopped her. The second figure turned, and for a brief second, the moonlight caught his face. He was a boy. No older than 17. Sophia clenched her jaw. The cartel used kids like this. Young, eager, desperate. They weren't soldiers, they were pawns. She hesitated for half a second. Then the first man moved, raising a pistol. Sophia fired. The shot tore through his shoulder, sending him spinning to the ground with a scream. The boy froze. "Go," Sophia whispered. "Now." He hesitated. Then, without looking back, he ran. The injured man groaned, clutching his shoulder. Sophia stepped forward, pressing the barrel of her rifle against his chest. "Who sent you?" she demanded. He let out a bitter laugh. "You already know her." Stomach twisted. El Fantasma hadn't sent these men to kill her. He had sent them to see if she would hesitate, and she had. The next morning, she knew the fight had finally reached its breaking point. Word spread fast. People whispered in the market. They stared at her with something new in their eyes. Not just fear, hope. For the first time, someone had fought back. But hope was dangerous. Hope made people brave, and El Fantasma couldn't afford bravery in San Miguel. By midday, a new message arrived. A single note slipped under her door. 6 words. "Tonight the church, come alone." Sophia's breath caught. The church was at the edge of town. Isolated. A trap. She knew it, and yet she had no choice. She had to go, because beneath the message, scribbled in uneven, shaky handwriting, was one more word. Luna. She drove to the church at dusk. The roads were empty. Not a single soul dared to be outside. Sophia's heart pounded in her chest. She parked the truck and stepped out, scanning the area. The old wooden doors of the church were slightly open, swaying in the breeze. She stepped inside. Darkness, silence. Then a voice. Smooth, calm. "I knew you'd come." Sophia whipped around. But before she could react, a sharp pain exploded at the back of her skull. Everything spun. The world tilted. She hit the ground hard, her vision blurred, the edges turning black. Through the haze, she saw a figure step toward her, tall, smiling. El Fantasma. She tried to move, tried to reach for her weapon, but she was too slow. The last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her whole. A small, trembling figure standing behind him. Luna. And then everything went black. Sophia's head throbbed, a sharp, pulsing pain radiating from the back of her skull. The world around her was blurred, shapes bleeding into one another, but she forced herself to stay conscious. She couldn't black out. Not now. The scent of old wood and candle wax filled her nose. The church. She was still inside. A voice drifted through the haze, smooth and unhurried. "You are impressive, Senora Morales, more than I expected." Sophia blinked hard, her vision sharpening enough to see him be standing a few feet away. El Fantasma. He wasn't what she expected. No monstrous scars, no tattoos marking his allegiance, just a man, tall, lean, with sharp eyes that gleamed with amusement. But it wasn't him that made Sophia's blood run cold. It was Luna. Standing beside him, her daughter's face was pale, her small hands clenched into fists. Sophia struggled to sit up, but her body was sluggish. She had been hit hard. El Fantasma crouched in front of her, his gaze filled with curiosity rather than malice. "You were military," he said, as if confirming a theory. "A sniper, no?" Sophia said nothing. His lips curled into a knowing smile. "The way you handled my men, precise, clean, you don't just kill." He tilted his head. "You hunt." Luna's eyes darted to her mother. Fear and trust flickered in them. Sophia focused on that. She needed to get Luna out. El Fantasma sighed, standing. "I could use someone like you." Sophia's jaw tightened. "I'd rather die." He chuckled. "You might." Then he snapped his fingers. Two men emerged from the shadows, dragging something. Between them, Sophia's breath caught. It was the boy, the one she had let go the night before. His face was swollen, his lip split, one eye nearly shut. He was barely conscious. El Fantasma sighed. "You should have killed him." The boy made a weak noise, barely able to lift his head. Sophia's stomach turned. "You're making people brave," El Fantasma said. "That is a problem." He pulled a gun from his belt and had handed it to Luna. Sophia's pulse spiked. Luna's hands trembled as she took the gun, staring at it like it was something foreign. "Kill him," El Fantasma said, his voice mockingly gentle. Luna's breath hitched. She didn't move. Sophia forced herself onto her knees. "Don't," she said, her voice sharp but steady. El Fantasma smiled. "Ah, see, this is interesting." He crouched beside Luna, his tone coaxing. "You're your mother's daughter, aren't you? Strong, unafraid." Luna's small shoulders trembled. Sophia locked eyes with her daughter. "Mija," she said softly, "this is not who we are." Luna's grip on the gun tightened. El Fantasma leaned in. "But maybe it should be." Sophia moved fast, explosive. She lunged, grabbing the gun from Luna's shaking hands and spinning on El Fantasma before his men could react. One shot, straight to his knee. He collapsed, screaming in pain. The two enforcers pulled their weapons, but Sophia was already moving. She whipped around, shooting one in the throat before the other even registered what was happening. The second man fumbled, firing wildly. Sophia rolled, using the pews as cover. The gunfire echoed through the empty church. El Fantasma groaned, clutching his knee, his breath ragged. The enforcer reloaded. Sophia popped up and fired. Headshot. The church fell into silence. Sophia's breath came fast, her pulse hammering. Luna stood frozen, eyes wide. El Fantasma tried to move, but pain stole his strength. Blood pooled beneath him. Sophia stepped forward, pressing the barrel of her gun to his forehead. His breathing was shallow, his usual smug expression replaced by something more primal. Fear. Sophia's finger curled around the trigger. "You think, killing me will change anything?" he rasped. Sophia's lips parted. Then she did something unexpected. She lowered the gun. El Fantasma frowned. "What are you—" Sophia turned to the boy, still slumped against the pews. She'd handed him the gun. His swollen eye widened. El Fantasma understood then. His breathing turned erratic. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." Sophia stepped back. The boy's hands trembled as he stared at the weapon. Then slowly, his grip steadied. Hidilos raised the gun. El Fantasma's eyes filled with real fear. Sophia placed a hand on Luna's shoulder, gently turning her away. A single gunshot rang out, then silence. They left the church as the sun began to rise. The town was different. Word had spread, the cartel was fracturing. Some fled, some rose against their own leaders. And El Fantasma, he was just another ghost. Sophia and Luna stood at the edge of their farm, watching the sky bleed into morning. Luna turned to her mother. "Is it over?" Sophia exhaled. "For now." Luna's small hand found hers. "You didn't kill him." Sophia looked down at her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No," she said softly, "but I gave someone else the choice." Luna nodded. She understood. Sophia pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. The past would always be a shadow behind them. But for the first time in a long time, the road ahead was clear.